Don't start. All right, I'm live. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Lee, and in this video, I will be talking about my home state of Tennessee. So this is part of the American Center in Moscow's 50 States project, where someone from each state in the United States talks about their state in depth. So in this video, for the next hour or so, I will be talking about my state of Tennessee. I'll be talking about the history. I'll give you a brief overview of my state. Also talk about some famous people from the state of Tennessee. And then towards the end of the video, I will discuss the current situation in Tennessee regarding the coronavirus. So before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So who am I? Like I said, I'm Alexander Lee, and I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. So I am currently a student at Moscow State University of International Relations, MGIMO, and I'm majoring in international relations. However, unfortunately, given the current circumstances, I decided to return to the United States because of the coronavirus pandemic. But before that, I had been living in Moscow for the past 2.5 years. And being back in Tennessee, I like Tennessee, but I definitely miss Moscow because it's a very stimulating city, and any city in Russia for that matter. It's very stimulating. And I've told my Russian friends before that I feel guilty sometimes that I don't know all the history of Russia, because you'll be walking down some street in Moscow and you'll pass some building or some monument, and you'll just know that some kind of very historical event happened there, and you feel guilty that you don't know all of the history that took place there. And although in this video I'm going to be talking about Tennessee, Tennessee hasn't had the same, nowhere nearly the same amount of impact on world events as the history of Moscow has, or Russia. But in this video, that doesn't mean that the history of Tennessee is irrelevant, because it has had impact on the globe. In this video, I will explain why the history of Tennessee is actually very interesting. Also, I'd like to say that my last name, Lee, a lot of Russian people ask me this. They say, Alex, are you Chinese? No, I'm not Chinese. I'm not Chinese. And I'm not related to the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. It's just the last name Lee is a very popular name here in the United States, and it means meadow in Old English. And what's interesting, that there's a word in Russian that's similar to has the same meaning as the Old English meaning of the word Lee. And it's like the Russian word is Polya, Polyakia. So like people from Poland, Polyakia, it literally means people from the field. So Ludzi is Polya. And that's kind of, my last name is the same kind of meaning in Old English. So it means like my ancestors or people who lived in the field or something. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. And before I start talking about the history of Tennessee, I want to say that I am not a historian, and I'm definitely not a historian of Tennessee. But I am just very informed, not very informed, but informed and proud citizen of the state that I inhabited for most of my life. So in this video, I'll just be giving you, what I know about my state. All right, so let's start with the first slide here. So brief overview of my state. So as you can see, Tennessee is in the southeast of the United States, and it was the 16th state admitted into the Union, and it was admitted in 1796. And currently in Tennessee, the population is approximately 6.8 million people. And the etymology of the word Tennessee, actually it's a Native American word from the Cherokee tribe, and it means winding river, so like a winding river. Also, there was a town, a Cherokee town in East Tennessee, also named Tennessee. And that's a very fitting name for Tennessee, because in Tennessee we have a ton of lakes and rivers and streams and creeks. There's just a lot of water here, and it rains all the time. And it's very good. There's a lot of water here. And Tennessee is known as the volunteer state. And later on in this video, I will explain why Tennessee got that nickname, the volunteer state. And the GDP of Tennessee is approximately $287 billion, and that's about 1.8% of US GDP. The main industries in Tennessee are automotive manufacturing. We have 3 automotive manufacturing plants of Nissan, GM, and Volkswagen here in Tennessee. They create a lot of jobs here. Also, another main industry here in Tennessee is actually energy production. So we have a ton of hydroelectric dams. There are several nuclear energy facilities, and that's another main industry in the state. Another main industry of the state is actually film production. And when I was looking up main industries in Tennessee, I already knew that automotive manufacturing and energy production were the main industries, but I didn't really know that film production was one of the main industries here in Tennessee. But then I thought about it, and I was like, actually, yeah, it's true. Film production is one of the main industries here in the state. And we have, based in Knoxville, there's actually a TV channel called, or TV network called Scripps Network. And they produce several channels like HGTV, which is like a home renovation TV show. There's also the Cooking Network. And all these TV shows are actually made here in the state of Tennessee. And also there is a very large movie theater chain that's actually based in Knoxville, and that is Regal Cinemas. And finally, another main industry here in the state is actually agriculture. So in Tennessee, we grow soybeans, tobacco, corn, cotton, and some wheat. All right, so next slide. So the flag of Tennessee. So when people look at this flag, I've heard people say, oh, that's the Confederate flag. No, it's not the Confederate flag. This is the flag of Tennessee. And it doesn't look anything like the Confederate flag. So, but as you can see, it's a red flag with a circle and 3 stars inside of the circle. And what the flag means, it's actually the 3 stars represent the 3 geographic locations, different geographic sections of the state. Those sections being East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee. And these 3 geographic sections of the state have played quite a large role in the history of the state. And I'll actually explain that later on in this presentation, how it has affected the history of the state. Because they're all different. Because in East Tennessee, where I'm currently at in Knoxville, it's very hilly, lots of mountains, the Appalachian Mountains. Whereas the Middle Tennessee, it's on a plateau, and it's actually very flat. And so is West Tennessee. West Tennessee is also very flat. And because since Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee are more flat than East Tennessee, it's more conducive to growing crops. So that has actually played a role in the history of the state. So in each geographic section, in East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, the 3 main cities in those sections are Knoxville, with a population of about 187,000 people, Nashville, which is the capital of the state, with a population of 692,000 people, and Memphis, with an estimated population of around 650,000 people. Okay, so, and also, here, let me see if there are any questions. So, questions from YouTube viewers. Ekaterina Soloviena, do you speak Russian? Yes, I do speak Russian. I am at MGIMO, and the program is in Russian. So it was I had to study Russian I had to study for 1 year before applying into MGIMO. Second question is, do you know any famous directors that are from Tennessee? I do, and you have to stick towards the end of the presentation. I'll be talking about famous people, and we will go over all the famous people. There's a ton of famous people from Tennessee, and we'll talk about that later. And yes, I do know some directors from Tennessee. So what Tennessee is known for, next slide. So what I think Tennessee is known for is actually its music. So I was in Перекресток in Moscow doing my shopping, and I was listening on the intercom on the radio in the store. They had some song playing, and there was some country music, and they were actually talking about Tennessee. And I was like, whoa, it's so crazy that even in Moscow they have country music playing on the radio in Перекресток. And I thought that was really funny, and just kind of shows that country music has really reached every part of the globe. Country music, being from Tennessee, has reached every part of the globe. So Nashville is actually known as Music City. And I actually have some friends from high school who are now professional musicians who actually live in Nashville, and they work in Nashville as musicians. And one of the most famous musicians from Tennessee is actually Elvis Presley. And Elvis, he wasn't born in Tennessee, he was actually born in Mississippi, but he lived most of his life in Tennessee, and his home, Graceland, which is in Memphis, is in Tennessee. And he's very famous all around the world. Also, Dolly Parton, I don't know if she's very well known in Russia, but I know she's very famous here in the United States, and especially in Tennessee. She's also a very famous country music singer. She's won many Grammy Awards, and she's just very famous. And also, so Tennessee occupies a very interesting part in the culture of country music. So the song Tennessee Whiskey, I don't know if you guys have heard this song. It's got around like 400 million views or something insane on YouTube. And Chris Stapleton is talking about just Tennessee. And also there's another famous song called Tennessee Waltz by Patti Page. And it's also a very famous state. I'm getting more questions. And yes, can you tell about places of education in the state? Yes, I have a section towards the end of the presentation about that. So we will talk about all the universities in Tennessee. All right, so I want to start talking about the history of the state. So I want to start from the very beginning. So the history of Tennessee. So the first people who arrived in the present day territory of Tennessee, they arrived about 15,000 years ago. And the people who lived in this period from about 15,000 years ago till about the year 800, they were mostly hunter-gatherers. And only from the years 800, there was a shift from hunter-gatherer societies to more agrarian societies. And this was the rise of the Mississippian culture. And the Mississippian culture was a mound-building Native American civilization that flourished in Midwest, the eastern and southeastern parts of the United States from approximately the year 800 to about 1600 AD. So, as you can see in this picture of the state of Tennessee, you can see the different tribes that lived here in Tennessee. The Cherokee, Yuchi, Shawnee, Chickasaw. And they were known for, like I said, building these mounds. So in this bottom picture, you can see this is more of an agrarian tribe. They actually, most of their food was corn. So that's how they shifted from being more hunter-gatherers to becoming more of like a agrarian society with a hierarchical structure. And so, yeah. And there's different theories as to why the Native American civilization declined. So one theory is that there was actually a mini ice age in the year around 1600 that caused a lot of the corn to not grow as well, and they just couldn't support their population as easily. But one of the more main theory as to why their civilization declined was actually because contact with European settlers and colonists. And these European settlers and colonists, they had diseases that the Native American populations just weren't immune to. So that's very relevant for today. So we actually, as a population all around the world, we don't have immunity to the coronavirus, and that's affecting us today. So the first European contact with these Native American tribes in Tennessee was actually in the year 1540 by Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto. So yeah, and so these civilizations flourished till about the year 600 AD. They started to decline, but in the year 1830, President Andrew Jackson actually signed the Indian Removal Act, and this is a very dark part of American history. And so the Indian Removal Act was the president told all the Native Americans, you guys no longer can be in the Southeast, and you need to move out west. And it was very controversial at the time. A lot of Americans did support it at the time, but there was significant opposition as well. And one of the main opponents to the Indian Removal Act was actually Davy Crockett, and I will talk more in depth about him later in this presentation. And he spoke out against this legislation of the president, Andrew Jackson. And this Indian Removal Act caused the Trail of Tears, which was the actual physical passage of these Native Americans from their territories out west. And a lot of Native Americans died during the Trail of Tears in the 1830s because it was really harsh conditions. They didn't have enough food. It was very cold. And so, yeah, it was just a very dark part of American history, but it's important to know about this. Okay, so first European settlers in Tennessee. The next slide. So I want to talk about the first settlers here in Tennessee. So first fort was actually Fort Loudon, and it was built by the British, and it was constructed west of the Appalachian Mountains, and it was constructed in the year 1756. So this fort was actually built at the beginning of the 7 Years' War. And in the United States, in Europe, they call it the 7 Years' War, but in the United States, they call it the French and Indian War. And this fort, Fort Loudon, actually played a crucial role during the French and Indian War from 1756 to 1763. So what you need to know about the 7 Years' War is that it led to the decline of France as a dominant power in Europe. And it marked a shift in the balance of power in Europe. So this was a very significant event in American history. And so after the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, because the French were actually aligned with the Native American tribes fighting the British. So the Cherokee, on the last slide I was telling you about, they were actually aligned with the French, and they actually attacked Fort Loudon several times during the French and Indian War. But after the war in 1763, which the Treaty of Paris ended the 7 Years' War, King George III actually signed this thing called the Royal Proclamation of 1763, in which what this thing said, this document, it actually didn't allow any of the British colonists to move west of the Appalachian Mountains. So they could not move into East Tennessee or into Tennessee at all. And the reason why he did this was actually because, for two reasons. One, he wanted to prevent future conflict with Native Americans. But probably the more reasonable reason why he did not allow the colonists to go west of the Appalachian Mountains was because it would have been very difficult to collect taxes, because East Tennessee at the time was very remote, and it would have been very difficult to collect taxes. But these colonists, they moved west of the Appalachian Mountains anyways. So as you can see, there's this picture of James White Fort, and this is actually in Knoxville. In that picture, you can actually see in the background there are two skyscrapers here in Knoxville. And this fort was built in the 18th century in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it was construction of the fort 1783, and actually it was renamed. The settlement was renamed in honor of Henry Knox, so it was named Knoxville. And Henry Knox was a Revolutionary War general, and actually George Washington's Secretary of War. So interesting stuff. All right, so next slide. Tennessee during the Civil War. So Tennessee, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, Tennessee has three different geographic sections. And this led to Tennessee kind of being unsure as to which side it wanted to pick during this Civil War. East Tennessee, since there weren't many plantations, because the soil here in East Tennessee, it's very hilly and rocky, and it's not very easy to grow things. Whereas in Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee, there were a lot more plantations because the soil is more rich in those two regions. So this is why Tennessee was actually divided whether to join the Union or the Confederacy. And Tennessee was actually the last state to declare formally its withdrawal from the Union. And at the beginning of the war, Tennessee was actually a battleground state. And one of the famous battles during the Civil War, which is the Battle of Shiloh, which is at the beginning of the war in 1862, it was a very bloody battle, and it was kind of a sobering reminder to both sides, the Union and the Confederacy, that this war was going to be very costly and long and drawn out. So yeah. All right, so next slide. Marble from Meade's Quarry. So in Knoxville, about a 10-minute drive from here, from where I'm currently located, there's this park, and it's called Meade's Quarry. And what's really interesting about Meade's Quarry is that these buildings, like on the slide here, you can see, were constructed using marble from Meade's Quarry here in East Tennessee. So Tennessee marble is a type of limestone that's only found in Tennessee, and architects really like it because it's kind of like got this pinkish tint, and it's also really easy to work with, and it's easily polished. So as you can see, the Air and Space Museum, the National Art Gallery, the Grand Central Station in New York City, and the Museum in DC, and Union Station even in Canada were constructed using Tennessee marble. And Knoxville was actually known as Marble City because the marble here was very, very good. So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to see if there are any questions. I think there's maybe a question. Oh yeah, so Dolly Parton's famous in Russia. That's interesting, very interesting. Okay, more questions here. Why did you choose Tennessee? Because I'm from Tennessee. Miley Cyrus is also from Tennessee. I totally forgot to mention Miley Cyrus. I knew I was going to forget someone from Tennessee in this presentation, but that's okay. You guys will call me out on that, and maybe we can make another video about other famous Tennesseans that I forgot to mention in this video. Tennessee, do you like moonshine? And was it really invented in Tennessee? I actually don't know if it was invented in Tennessee. Probably not. Probably people were making various types of alcohol way back in Europe before the even coming over to North America. But I will talk about Jack Daniels at the end of this presentation. So yeah. All right, so next slide, the Scopes monkey trial. So what's really interesting about Tennessee is that this part of history called the Scopes monkey trial. So the Scopes monkey trial was this very famous case that happened between the state of Tennessee and John Thomas Scopes. He was a science teacher in Dayton, Tennessee. And he was actually prosecuted for teaching Darwinian theories of evolution in a Tennessee public school. And at the time, teaching or even probably talking about evolution was illegal in Tennessee, because Tennessee was and still is relatively conservative state, and people just didn't like that their children were being taught these quote-unquote radical ideas about evolution and monkeys turning into men, because you all know that famous picture of like that the monkey turns into this walking man. Anyways, that's why they called it the monkey trial, because they were debating whether whether or not to teach evolution. So this case actually was very famous at the time across the entire United States, because in the Northeast, people were thinking like, wow, like Tennessee's like this really backwards place. They're not allowing a high school teacher to teach evolution. And also at the time, the case featured two of the greatest lawyers of the era as opposing attorneys. So William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow. What's interesting is that William Jennings Bryan was actually the United States Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson in 1913 to 1915. And unfortunately, John Scopes, the high school teacher, he lost the case, and William Jennings Bryan was actually supporting the state of Tennessee. So he actually won the case. And so John Scopes lost the case, and he was fined $100 for breaking the law for teaching evolution. And $100 in that time is actually about $1,500 in today's money. So only in 1967 did it become legal to teach evolution in the Tennessee public school system. So that's kind of interesting. So the next slide is actually related to kind of Scopes' monkey trial. It's kind of talking about why Tennessee is kind of this more conservative place. So the Bible Belt, Tennessee is smack dab in the Bible Belt of the United States. So the Bible Belt is just this informal region in the southern southeast part of the United States. And what it means is that it's a socially conservative area, and a lot of people go to church. So church attendance across all denominations in the Bible Belt is higher than the national average. What's interesting is that I actually think that because Tennessee is also known, and also the South is known for this thing called Southern hospitality. So what that means, people are very hospitable, very nice. It's so weird, coming back from Moscow, and I'll just be walking outside. People say hello, they smile at you, and it's such a contrast to Moscow, where everyone's not smiling in the metro, pushing around and stuff. But what I think is actually the Bible Belt and the whole south of the United States is actually very similar, more similar to Russia and Russian culture than a lot of people think. Because in Russia is also known for its gostoprimчивость, hospitality. And so is the southeast of the United States. And also, a lot of Russians are also very conservative. They have more traditional values. And there are more traditional values in the southeast of the United States. And so that's kind of why I think there's a similarity between the southeast and Russian culture. All right, I think I might have gotten another question here. Is the cost of living high in Tennessee? No, it's actually not compared to other parts of the state or parts of the United States. Tennessee is actually one of the greatest places to live in the United States, I think, because there is no income tax. So I don't know all the states that don't have income tax, but Tennessee is one of the states that does not have income tax. You have to pay federal tax, but you don't have to pay income tax. There's only a sales tax. So sales tax in Russian is a value-added tax. I forgot the acronym, NVS in Russian. And that makes the cost of living in Tennessee relatively low compared to other parts in the United States. And also another question, what do you study at МГИМО? I study международные отношения, so international relations. That's what I'm currently studying. All right, so the next slide I want to talk about is the Tennessee during the Great Depression. So the Great Depression in the 1930s in the United States is actually a very interesting part of not only Tennessee history, but also American history. So as you know, 1930s was peak of the economic Great Depression. And so FDR, who was the president at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in order to stimulate the economy, he passed this thing called the New Deal. And the New Deal was a series of government programs in order to help stimulate the economy. So what this was is kind of, at the time, John Maynard Keynes, who was a famous economist, he came up with this theory that if the economy is not doing so well, in order to improve it, the government can actually increase its spending, create jobs, build things, build infrastructure, and that would lead to creating jobs for people, put money in people's pockets, and those people would spend their money, and it would just improve the overall economy. So that's kind of Keynesian economics, basic gist of Keynesian economics, where government spends money and helps improve the economy. But what's also interesting is that the 1930s was a very interesting time because there was actually a rise of communism and socialism in the United States. 1920s, actually, Leon Trotsky came and he gave several lectures in universities in the United States. But communism and socialism only really started to catch on in the United States after 1929, the beginning of the Great Depression. And if you even read like books by John Steinbeck or Ernest Hemingway, like Grapes of Wrath or In Dubious Battle, and you read these books and you kind of can feel that there's kind of this, and these books were written during the 1930s, these books have this communist and socialist undertones to them. And last night, I was actually looking up if Ernest Hemingway was a communist or not. I mean, we know that he spent a lot of time in Cuba, but actually I read last night that he actually worked for the NKVD, the Народный комиссариат внутренних дел. And I was like shocked by this, like, whoa, like I did not know this. But so after this video, I'm going to read more about this. I only just read this really late last night, but I was very surprised, very interesting. But it kind of confirms my theory of these writers had a lot of, they put a lot of communist and socialist ideas into their writings, and that's why, the rise of communism in the United States. And the reason why I put these pictures of these building these hydroelectric dams in East Tennessee was because if you're familiar with any Soviet artwork, you know that this kind of looks similar to that kind of Soviet artwork where they have these big cranes and people are building things and these geometric shapes. So I looked at these pictures like, wow, this looks very similar to some Soviet artwork. So anyways, 1930s, there was a rise of communism in the United States. But in East Tennessee, part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, he created the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA. And TVA built all these hydroelectric dams. It improved East Tennessee, gave people electricity. And you can see this poster, it says TVA, electricity for all. I mean, I look at this poster and I think, wow, this is it looks almost like a Soviet poster. So I thought this was very interesting. So in East Tennessee, they made these hydroelectric dams, and this produced a ton of electricity. And Alcoa, which stands for the Aluminum Corporation of America, they actually decided to move their plant, their main plant that produces aluminum, to East Tennessee. Because when you produce aluminum, you actually need a lot of electricity. And interesting fact is that all the aluminum that was produced during World War II, for all the planes that were in the U.S. military, they all used aluminum that was produced at Alcoa here in East Tennessee. So the next slide, I'm actually going to talk about another government enterprise that needed a lot of electricity and picked East Tennessee specifically because East Tennessee had a lot of electricity in the 1930s, and that's why they chose this site. So, and that government project was actually the Manhattan Project. So the Manhattan Project was a research and development undertaking during World War II that produced the first nuclear weapons. And they actually chose Oak Ridge, Tennessee, as the main location site where they would actually enrich the uranium from U-238 to U-235. And you need a lot of electricity in order to do this. So that's why they chose Oak Ridge. And the project was led by scientist Robert Oppenheimer, lecturer at Berkeley University in California. And he was the main chief scientist of the Manhattan Project. And this project was so secretive that only a few dozen people in the entire United States knew about what the project was for. So you can actually see in the top picture, there's all these ladies here in East Tennessee and Oak Ridge. They were working at one of the facilities that was enriching uranium. And they did not know what they were even doing there. They were told, they were given a job, they say, do this job, but they didn't know why they were enriching uranium, what it was going to be used for. They were just told that it was just part of the war effort, and don't tell anyone about what you're doing here. So these pictures, it says, so what you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. And loose talk helps our enemy, so let's keep our trap shut. So when I saw these pictures last night of Oak Ridge in the 1930s, it made me think of this famous Russian poster, Soviet poster. It says "Не болтай." So I thought that was kind of interesting. But Oak Ridge was actually known as the secret city because no one was allowed to talk about what they did in Oak Ridge. But today, so now I want to talk about Oak Ridge National Lab today. So what do they do there today? Because it's still a national research laboratory, and it's a very important national lab. So what they do is they actually study, they do a lot of energy and material science research, and they have it's run by Department of Energy, and they actually also have these neutron target facilities. So what this is they have these neutron beams, and they shoot these targets with like different molecules and atoms, and it's very complicated. But they actually look at how when you shoot some kind of molecule or some kind of cellular structure, you can actually see the structure. It's one of their tools they're used there. Anyways, the only reason why I'm talking about this is because my stepdad actually works at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he currently is working on coronavirus 19 research at the supercomputer facility, Summit. So Summit is actually the most powerful supercomputer in the world currently, and it's located at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So right now they're doing a lot of coronavirus research on these supercomputers, and they're modeling the actual molecular structure and the spike proteins on the coronavirus and how they would interact with other molecules. All right, so someone asked about universities in Tennessee. So Tennessee is a great place to get your education. So there are a lot of great universities here in the state of Tennessee. One of the best universities in the state of Tennessee is actually Vanderbilt University, and also that's in Nashville. And another university is University of Tennessee in Knoxville. It's a big state school. Vanderbilt is a private institution, whereas University of Tennessee in Knoxville is a state that's run by the state. And Tennessee really has a lot of good engineering programs, a lot of good science programs, molecular biology. And another thing that's so great about University of Tennessee Knoxville is that, like I was mentioning, Oak Ridge National Lab. So if you're interested in research, physics, math, or molecular biology, a lot of those people from Oak Ridge National Lab, they actually either help out at University of Tennessee. Another fact about Oak Ridge is that it's one of the highest per capita PhDs in the country, because Oak Ridge is a very small city. It's just outside of Knoxville, but most of the people that work there have PhDs, and it actually means that the highest per capita PhD of anywhere in the United States. Another university is Belmont University. It's also in Nashville, but this is a university that's more for like the arts, so like performing, acting, music. And I have some friends who actually go to Belmont University. Another good university is University of Memphis, ETSU, which is East Tennessee State University, and Tennessee Tech. So all great universities. All right, so this next slide is talking about Alpha Industries, and I didn't know about Alpha Industries until I went and moved to Moscow. So I was actually at MGIMO, and there's someone walking in the hallway, and they have this shirt that says Alpha Industries and says Knoxville, Tennessee. And I was like, what in the world? Like, that's so strange. Like, someone in Moscow is wearing a shirt that says Knoxville, Tennessee on it. But I didn't know what Alpha Industries was. But I looked it up, and it's actually a textile manufacturing company that was contracted by the Department of Defense in the 1960s to make military uniforms. And today, they no longer make uniforms for the military. It's actually just fashionable clothing. So I just saw someone with this type of t-shirt walking in Moscow. And actually, a lot of people in Moscow somehow know about Alpha Industries. And I was actually recently driving around here in Knoxville, and I saw that there's a distribution center for Alpha Industries. And this picture is just a picture in the 1980s of Alpha Industries, their factory here in Knoxville. All right, so next, what I want to talk about is famous people from Tennessee. So someone mentioned, like, do you know any like directors from Tennessee? So I'm going to read some more of these questions. So can you tell about schools of America? So this talk is mostly just about Tennessee. I'd love to do another talk maybe about different schools in the United States. Next question is, what kind of hobby is most interesting in Tennessee? I'd say a really interesting hobby to have in Tennessee is actually sailing. So you think like, whoa, Tennessee, like in sailing, there's like, that doesn't go together. But actually it does, because in Tennessee we have a lot of lakes. And I'm actually a sailing instructor, and so if you ever come to Knoxville, I can teach you how to sail, because we have a lot of really nice big lakes with a lot of wind. And so that's probably one of the best hobbies to have in Tennessee. Would you say that the Scopes case plays a role in future changes in American or Tennessee education? I don't know. I'd say that, I mean, like I said, it only was legal to teach theory of evolution in Tennessee only in 1967. And I remember in high school, even when I went to like this pretty good high school, and I remember like there were some students who were against the idea that the teacher was teaching about evolution. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's just a scientific theory. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but most scientists believe that the theory of evolution is a legitimate theory, and it's called a theory, but in reality, it's most likely the truth. So I bet the IRS is not happy about Tennessee not having income tax. Well, the IRS is actually federal. It's on the federal level. So IRS, if you get an income, say you get $10,000 or whatever, IRS takes a portion out of that. So the federal government takes a portion. And then if you're living in a state that has federal or state income tax, then the state would take another percentage out of your income. And so yeah, so it's better to live in a state. I know Florida is also a state that doesn't have income tax. Tennessee, I think Delaware. There are a few other states that don't have income tax. But the IRS, that's the federal tax agency. And then each state has its own tax agency. So in Tennessee, we just have tax on like buying food and anything that you buy or sell in the state has tax on it. So was MGIMO the only option that you were considering? I was actually considering going to school in DC to study international relations, but I did a gap year at MGIMO and I really liked it. And I thought, you know what, like I might as well just keep improving my Russian and stay all 4 years at MGIMO. So that's why I was also thinking about Дипломатическая академия, but I just picked MGIMO because it's a little bit bigger. I hear that some states, this is another question, I hear that some states in the United States can give some payment for your life in the current state. So right now, actually, with there's a economic stimulus bill that President Trump recently passed, giving money to people. Actually, so if you're like living in a family, so if you file your taxes like with husband and wife, you would actually get $2,400 depending on your income. And if you file your taxes as an individual, I think you get $1,200. And recently this money actually came out to people in the past couple days, weeks. So if just keep typing your questions in the chat box, I will answer them. So now I'm going to talk about famous people from Tennessee. So someone mentioned director from Tennessee. Well, guess what? We're going to talk about that director. But first, we're going to talk about Davy Crockett. So like I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, if you remember, I talked about Davy Crockett. So Davy Crockett lived from 1786 to 1836. He was an American folk hero, frontiersman, soldier, and politician. And he convinced Tennesseans to volunteer to fight in the Texas Revolution, which was a war 1835 to 1836 against Mexico. And so he convinced a bunch of Tennesseans to go fight and help people, colonists living in Texas at the time. And that's why Tennessee is called the volunteer state, because a bunch of Tennesseans went and volunteered. And he died at the Battle of the Alamo. It's where the Mexican general Santa Anna laid siege to the battle at the Alamo. And if you visit Texas, you can actually visit the Alamo. It's still there to this day. And Davy Crockett is known as this American folk hero. So if you read like Huckleberry Finn, Huck Finn is kind of this mythical type of literature figure. This mountain guy who runs through the woods with barefoot, and Davy Crockett's kind of the same type of guy. He ran around. There's a picture of him with this raccoon hat. And what's funny is Davy Crockett's from East Tennessee, and what's funny, he would wear this hat with this raccoon on it. And what's funny is actually just outside my window, right here, you can see there's a picture of this raccoon, and it was actually living in the attic of this house. So I moved out. I moved from my parents' house. I moved to Moscow, and the raccoons moved into my room. So yeah, but I'm just trying to say that in Tennessee we have a lot of raccoons. They're everywhere. And they're very cute, they're very smart, but they're also pests because they can destroy the attic of your house. But yeah, so Davy Crockett's like this folk hero, kind of like also, like I said, Huck Finn and Johnny Appleseed. They occupy this almost mythical part of American culture. So the next slide, another famous person from Tennessee is Quentin Tarantino. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Quentin Tarantino. This is the director, a very famous Hollywood film director from East Tennessee, from Knoxville. And what's interesting, so next time you watch a Quentin Tarantino film, listen very carefully, because in every film he has a reference to East Tennessee. For example, in the movie Pulp Fiction, Bruce Willis's character, Butch, has a watch that was purchased from a general store in Knoxville. And in the movie Inglourious Bastards, Brad Pitt's character, Lieutenant Aldo Raine, is from Maynardville, Tennessee. Maynardville is just north of Knoxville, and it's a good little town to visit. So yeah, Quentin Tarantino. All right, next person from famous person from Tennessee is actually Justin Timberlake. You know, you wouldn't think that Justin Timberlake's from Tennessee, but he actually is. So he was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1981, and he's a singer, songwriter, and actor. He's been in a lot of movies. There's a really good movie by Justin Timberlake. One of my favorite movies is actually In Time. I recommend that you guys watch that movie during this quarantine. It's really a good movie. All right, next guy who's from not East Tennessee. He was from East Tennessee, but from Tennessee. So it was actually David G. Farragut. So in Knoxville, there's this like suburb of Knoxville called Farragut, and it's actually renamed after David Farragut. He was the first admiral, rear admiral, vice admiral, and admiral in the United States Navy, because at the time the Navy only had the highest rank was captain, and so he was actually the first admiral in the Navy. And he was actually opposed to the secession of Tennessee to the Confederacy. He was from Tennessee, but he actually fought for the Union. And like I was saying at the beginning of this presentation, how Tennessee is subdivided into 3 different geographic sections, and they're different. This is more proof that Farragut was opposed to the secession of Tennessee to the Confederacy, and East Tennessee was more leaning towards the Union, whereas Middle and West Tennessee were more towards the Confederacy. And there's actually a Navy vessel, USS Farragut. It's a Arleigh-class, Burke-class destroyer, and it's named after David Farragut. All right, next person who's famous from Tennessee is actually Cormac McCarthy. So you probably haven't heard of Cormac McCarthy. Maybe you have, but I'm sure you've heard of his writing, and a lot of his novels have been adapted into movies. So he was born in Rhode Island, but he was actually brought up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the high school that I went to, he didn't go to the high school I went to, but there's a big rivalry between these 2 high schools in Knoxville. So it's Webb High School and Catholic High School. And Cormac McCarthy actually went to Catholic High School. And so he's an American novelist, essayist, short story writer, and playwright, and screenwriter. But his writing is very dark. So it's like he writes about these post-apocalyptic genres, and his books are very dark. And Southern Gothic is kind of a Gothic literature style, is like talking about characters who have a lot of flaws. And if it's just Southern Gothic, it's just a genre where it's talking about a character who's severely flawed, but it's set in the South. So you've heard of his, it's not his movie, but he wrote a book called No Country for Old Men. It's kind of a horror mystery movie. I haven't seen it. I've only seen trailers for it. I want to see it. It looks really good. And maybe I will consider reading it. And I've seen the movie The Road. The Road is also one of these post-apocalyptic movies, very dark, but I recommend you watch it. But it's kind of scary, so just take that in mind. All right, so next famous person from Tennessee is Morgan Freeman. Who would have thought he was from Tennessee? But he was actually born in Memphis, Tennessee. He's an American actor and film narrator. One of his best movies, I think, is Shawshank Redemption. He was in the movie Bruce Almighty, where he played God, and the movie Olympus Has Fallen. So Morgan Freeman. All right, next famous person from Tennessee is actually Jack Daniels. So you probably have heard of Jack Daniels whiskey. And so Jack Daniels was this guy who lived in Tennessee, in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and he produced his whiskey, Old Number 7, as they call it, Jack Daniels whiskey. And all the Jack Daniels whiskey that's sold anywhere in the world all of it is made in Lynchburg, Tennessee. And what's really interesting about Lynchburg, Tennessee, it's in a county, Moore County, and that county is actually a dry county. So what that means is that you can't buy or sell alcohol in that county. Like I said at the beginning, Tennessee is part of the Bible Belt, more or less conservative state. And they just say in the county, we're not selling alcohol. You have to go to another county to actually buy alcohol. So it's weird that the place where they make Jack Daniels, you can't even buy it in that county. Another funny thing is that whenever people ask me, where are you from? And I say Tennessee, and they have no clue where that is. I say, do you know Jack Daniels? And they're like, oh, Jack Daniels, Jack Daniels. Of course they know Jack Daniels. Well, I say, well, I'm from the place where they make that whiskey. So they're like, okay, now I know. But Jack Daniels, what's interesting is technically not a whiskey, but instead a bourbon. And I was reading about this last night. I don't understand why it's technically a bourbon, but for some kind of legal purposes, the state of Tennessee says it's not actually a whiskey, it's actually a bourbon. But you'll have to look into that on your own, because I wouldn't be able to explain to you why that is. All right, so next slide. So Sequoia. So Sequoia was this Native American guy who was the not first, but one of the only people in history to actually create an entire alphabet for a language. So he was a member of the Cherokee Indian tribe, so here in East Tennessee, and he made it possible for Cherokee Indians to be able to write down their language. So this is the first time, like I said, one of the first times that a member of a pre-literate people created an original and effective writing system. So in Russian or in English, they actually took a lot of different generations for the language to actually evolve and to actually create the language. And lots of people, contributed to the creation of the written Russian language or the written English language or other languages for that matter. So Sequoia was one of the first only people in the world to create an entire written language for the Cherokee language. That's very interesting. So he's a famous person from East Tennessee. All right, next slide is talking about Dolly Parton. So Dolly Parton was born in Sevier County, Tennessee, which is not far from here, not far from Knoxville. She's a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, record producer, actress, author, and businesswoman. And she's received 10 Grammy Awards. So that's a lot of Grammy Awards. And she's a businesswoman because she opened up this theme park in Sevier County. And it's all these rides, and it's a really fun place. So if you ever come to East Tennessee or Tennessee, definitely recommend you go visit Dolly Parton's theme park called Dollywood. So yeah, Dolly Parton's another famous person from East Tennessee. All right, so next famous person from Tennessee is Elvis Presley. Like I said, he was born in Memphis, but he was born in Mississippi, but moved to Memphis, where he spent a significant portion of his life. He's regarded as one of the most significant cultural icons of the 20th century, known as the King of Rock and Roll, or simply the King. And you can actually visit his house in Memphis called Graceland. All right, next famous person from Tennessee is actually Al Gore. So I'm not sure if you guys know who Al Gore is, but he was born in Washington, but his family is from Tennessee. And he was actually a senator and congressman from Tennessee. And he was the 45th vice president of the United States under the Clinton administration from 1993 to 2001. And you can see this is a picture of him running for president in the year 2000 against George Bush. And he actually won the popular vote in the year 2000, but he lost in the Electoral College. So that's kind of interesting. There's a big scandal because Florida, there was a mistake in counting in Florida, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided that it's actually it's up to Florida to decide whether the Electoral College votes go to Al Gore or George Bush. Anyways, big scandal in the year 2000. So, but now he's an environmentalist, and he's produced several documentaries talking about climate change. And I recommend that you guys watch the movie An Inconvenient Truth, made by Al Gore. All right, next famous people from Tennessee. So Tennessee's actually produced three presidents, from Tennessee. So Andrew Jackson, 1767 to 1845, seventh president of the United States. Not known as one of the best presidents of the United States, but because he was known for, like I said, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So yeah, not known as one of the best presidents. He was also a slave owner. So yeah. James K. Polk, another president from Tennessee. He also subscribed to the same type of ideologies as Andrew Jackson. He was kind of a protege of Andrew Jackson. Very similar policies. And he was also from Tennessee, 11th president from of the United States. And Andrew Johnson, he was the 17th president of the United States. And what's interesting about Andrew Johnson was that he was the vice president of Abraham Lincoln. And when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, he actually became president. And he's not known also as one of the greatest presidents in American history. But one of the good things, well, it depends who you ask. If you ask people in the United States, one of the good things that he did, he actually was responsible for the purchase of Alaska. So 1867, I think, was the purchase of Alaska. And so people in Russia sometimes wonder if they should have sold Alaska to the United States. But actually, at the time, there was a rational decision to actually sell Alaska, because Russia wasn't really interested in getting into conflicts really far away from its capital at the time. So they just said, okay, we'll just sell this part of our territory, and it will simplify things for in the future. All right, so next slide is U.S. ambassadors to Russia from Tennessee. So there's only two U.S. ambassadors from Tennessee. First is George Campbell. He was only in St. Petersburg because St. Petersburg was the capital of Russia at the time during the Russian Empire, and he was only there for about a year. Not much is written about him being an ambassador, but Neil Brown, he was actually ambassador in 1850 to 1853, and there's a lot written about him. So he first came to St. Petersburg, and he really didn't like it, and he thought about going back, but then something changed, and then he withdrew his letter of resignation. He decided to actually stay in Moscow or in St. Petersburg longer, and he arrived in Russia at a pretty turbulent time in Russian-American affairs, because the emperor at the time, who was the emperor at the time? Nicholas Alexander II. I don't remember exactly who the leader of Russia at the time was, but it was a very difficult time between Russian-American policy, because the United States supported the revolutions in Europe of 1848, whereas Russia did not like, the monarchy obviously is not going to be supporting the revolutions overthrowing other monarchies in Europe. And so this is kind of a turbulent time between the United States and Russia. All right, so next slide is Tennessee politics today. So the governor, Bill Lee. I'm not related to Bill Lee in any way. He has my last name, or I have his last name, but I'm not related to him. But someone who actually I am related to is actually in the Tennessee government, is Sharon Lee, and she is or was the Supreme Court Justice of Tennessee, and she's now one of just the justices in the Tennessee Supreme Court. So I am related to her. And the senators of Tennessee are Marsha Blackburn, who was recently elected into office, and Alexander Ramar. Like I said, Tennessee is a majority Republican state, and Tennessee has 11 electoral college votes. All right, so current situation in Tennessee with the coronavirus. So I think it's Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina are actually talking about opening up their states, and there's been a lot of criticism if they should do that or not. Well, the governor, Bill Lee, he said he's going to open up the state next week. And so I don't know. It's a hot debate right now. I mean, like recently I was driving around. I went to the store, and there was just a massive protest of people, like in these pictures, protesting the closure of the state. Some say it's unconstitutional, but it's just kind of difficult to say. I mean, if it saves lives by closing the state, maybe it's justified. But Bill Lee says they're going to open the state up, but they're going to keep social distancing guidelines in place, and they're going to continue to limit gatherings of 10 people. So when this coronavirus goes away, this very annoying coronavirus, when it goes away, and you come visit Tennessee, what should you do? What should you visit when you come to Tennessee? Well, first thing I would recommend is if you come to East Tennessee, is to definitely hike in the Smoky Mountains National Forest. It's so Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1930s actually made the national park. He designated the Smoky Mountains as a national forest. And it's very beautiful, and it's known as the Smoky Mountain National Forest because there's there's a lot of rain, like I said, in Tennessee, and it makes these clouds in the mountains, and it's very beautiful, and that's why it's called the Smoky Mountains. If you're in Nashville, I recommend you go listen to some country music, definitely, and also you should visit the Opryland Hotel. It's this really cool hotel. It's all indoors. There's these boats. It's a big conference center. It's very interesting. And I recommend you visit it. And if you're in Memphis, I definitely recommend you visit the home of Elvis Presley, Graceland. So you should definitely visit Graceland. All right, so I'll answer. This is pretty much the last slide that I have, but I'll answer. I see someone say Rocky Top. You always, yeah, that's a great. How do you know that? It's awesome. So I'm going to answer these questions, and then. That will be it for this video. So what do you think about 80s and 90s in Tennessee? Well, I wasn't alive then, but I don't really know. I can't really answer what was going on in the 80s and 90s in Tennessee. So yeah. And Yekaterina Solovyevna, it's surprising about Hemingway. Yeah, you should look that up. Yeah, he's part of the NKVD, which is the precursor to the Russian KGB. Can you say a few words of Tennessee's system of radio? Well, we have AM and FM radio. There's NPR here, which is a great national public radio, 91.9. If you're in Tennessee, in East Tennessee, that's the station. And there's not, I don't know, radio here seems like it's kind of dying out, but NPR is still very popular here. Then someone mentions Rocky Top. That's really cool. How do you know that? That's awesome. It's a great song. I recommend that you guys listen to that song, Rocky Top. Look that up after this video. And another question is, what entertaining radio would you recommend to listen online? NPR. You can download NPR app on the Google Play Store or on the App Store. NPR is very interesting. Why did I choose to study in Russia? Always been interested in Russia, and I just chose to study there for 1 year, and actually started off as 1 semester, and that semester turned into 1 year, and then I said I'm going to apply for 4 years. So yeah, that's why I'm studying in Russia, because it's very interesting. Do you like football? American football, to be honest, not really. My sport of choice is basketball and swimming, so I was a big swimmer in high school. So yeah. And some last questions here. Is Tennessee a safe state? Do you have crime here? I would consider Tennessee a relatively safe state. So yeah, I'd say it's a very safe state. Is there typical Tennessee food? Yes, actually there's. I forgot to mention that. So typical Tennessee food, another thing to visit when you visit Tennessee is Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel is in all of the Southeast, but if you want typical Southern food, I would recommend going to Cracker Barrel. So Cracker Barrel has got biscuits, gravy, bacon, eggs, and all sorts of things Southern. So I definitely recommend you guys try that out. Do you want to become the 3rd U.S. ambassador to Russia? Yeah, I'd like to. I'm interested in a career in the State Department. We'll see how that goes. I want to become a lawyer, but we'll see. We'll see. but it's very difficult to get into the State Department. Thank you for saying I'm a good speaker. I appreciate that. Is it hard for LGBT people to live in Tennessee, and is the Bible Belt extremely traditional? I would say that in Tennessee, people are very accepting here. So if you are gay or if you're any part of the LGBTQ community, very acceptive community here, especially in the cities, I'd say. So anywhere in Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, the cities are very open. So you won't have any problems, being gay in Tennessee. So that's about it. So thank you for listening to this video. I really enjoyed talking about my home state of Tennessee, and I really hope to get back to Moscow soon because I love Tennessee, but I want to learn more about Russia. And so I'm looking forward to maybe seeing you guys at the American Center in Moscow and potentially giving another talk in the future. So thank you so much. I appreciate all your comments, questions, and also, if you're interested in learning more about Tennessee, I have a YouTube channel that you can check out. It's just called Alexander Lee, and I have several videos about Tennessee. So yeah, subscribe to AMC's channel, this channel here, and if you're interested, check out my channel. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Thank you.